Hey guys, Pastor Tim here. I've got Pastor Connor here with me today as our student pastor. I've been doing a series of videos where I'm interviewing our staff and asking them a few questions to help them clarify their ministry and mostly to help you understand who they are, what their calling is, and most importantly, how you and I can partner with each staff member to help them do their ministry, be more effective in their ministry. And I'm not talking about just nuts and bolts. We're going to get into it mostly in prayer, or mostly through prayer. And this all comes from Romans chapter 15, the message I'll be preaching this particular coming Sunday. And I'm going to share with you in a minute as I kind of interview Connor and give him an opportunity to share with you his heart on some things. It's going to mimic these verses that we're going to be studying this coming Sunday in Romans chapter 15, verses 14 and or all the way to really to the end of the chapter. As we've been seeing, Paul's been laying out a bunch of theology and talking about how the church is supposed to treat each other as far as Jews and Gentiles, not arguing over things that aren't essentials to the faith and that sort of thing. He's talked about what the gospel is, how salvation happens, all of that kind of stuff. And then he gets here at the very end, and Paul's talking to this church that he didn't plant, but he has a passion for, and he longs to go and see them and them become partners with him in ministry and to launch him out to go to another area to spread the gospel to a group of people who don't know who Jesus is. And so through all of that, Paul says here in verse 14, my brothers and sisters. So first of all, he's talking to the church, and we know that. And then he goes on, he says, I'm convinced about you that you are full of goodness and filled with knowledge and able to instruct one another. And so he says, I know that y'all have enough knowledge to teach each other and to grow in the faith yourselves. And then he says, nonetheless, I've written to remind you more boldly on some points. And so Paul says, even though you have some basic knowledge and you could instruct each other and teach each other, God's called me to remind you of some things to help you grow and be even stronger. And that sometimes we all need someone to come along and be more bold in our life to get us to reinvigorate and get us back on the right path. Pastor Connor and the other staff all have various roles within our congregation that is called, where we're all called to do that very thing. And so that's what God's called me to do, I believe, through this passage to you in this particular setting. And here's part of how we do this, is to recognize what Pastor Connor's role is here, what his calling is, and how we can come alongside to love him, minister to him. Not for him, though. Here's the key. This isn't about Connor. This isn't about Tim. This isn't about putting our pastors or our staff up on a pedestal and saying, look at how great they are, let's support them. This is about how we come alongside each other and do ministry together. So all that being said, hopefully that lays a little quick foundation, Connor, for our conversation here right now. You know a little bit about what we're talking about. You're familiar with this passage. I've read it to you this week, and we've talked about it already fairly extensively. But what I want to do is open up, and you tell me a little bit, just introduce yourself as far as, tell me about how did you come to know Christ, first of all, and how did that lead into your calling? About what do you feel? Do you feel like God has called you to ministry? How did that happen? What did that look like?
All right. So I had parents really involved in the church as a kid. I'm grateful for that. And so they took us to church regularly, served in the church, in and out of the church. We were in church all the time growing up.
You watched your parents serve?
I did.
Cool.
I did. And then I think when I was 9, I experienced conviction, I think, for the first time, and told my dad, I don't really know what this is. I just know that I want to do something about it. And so we went and met with our pastor. His name was Doug Davis at the time. He was the pastor at Lizella Baptist way back in the day. And prayed there. I believe received salvation at that point, was baptized. And then when I was probably 14 or 15, I had a couple youth pastors who were awesome. And they were more so personally for me, just invested into my life and discipled me. And there was a point when I was about 15 where I realized I know the Lord, but I'm not doing this right. Not that it's just about doing it, but I'm not doing the part I am supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I believe I knew the Lord because I experienced conviction along the way in that. And so I think that was evidence that he was there. He was just saying, hey, you're not where you need to be. And so wrestled with that for a couple years. I was 16 years old, and I remember I was driving home in the rain, and I pulled over in a parking lot and said, Lord, you can have whatever it is. You have it all. I don't know what went into all that. I think it was just conviction. And so I think I was saved at a younger age, but at that point I really started doing my part. I think a lot of times we act like, oh, I got saved and that's it. And it was like, now it's time for me to actually put some action to it. And then my senior year of high school, was planning to go to Mercer and do a physical therapy degree and make good money and do all those things. And I sensed a call to ministry. At first, I thought that was missions, and then I thought it was youth ministry, and then I didn't know exactly what it was. You know, it's a similar story to a lot of us. Mm-hmm. But I knew it was ministry. Went and visited some colleges and some seminaries and stuff, and the Lord very clearly affirmed that along the way. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. No one in my family before had been in ministry. Most of them are believers and involved in the church, but no one had ever served in ministry. I'd only seen what I'd seen from my side of it, and said, okay, let's do it. And so then moved to seminary in New Orleans when I was 18. One of my youth pastors I mentioned earlier was there studying in seminary. I spent my senior year spring break in New Orleans with him. I went to classes with him. Not many people get to do that. Not typical spring break, but not many people get to do that too. And on my way home, I knew God said, this is where I'm calling you to be. And so went there for the next 6 years. Moved back right after COVID or in the middle of COVID. Just crazy COVID. I was living 8 hours from home, taking online classes. Yeah. And said, what are we doing? Moved back here. And then a couple months later, I think I'd visited Lighthouse a couple times and other churches where I knew people, and turns out the day that I moved back, the former student pastor here had resigned. Yeah. And like the Lord was just doing all these things, and I didn't know it, and I didn't even know if I was ready to go back into that. I was finishing my master's degree. It was just all crazy. But then the Lord worked it out, and it's just been steps. You said something, I never heard anybody say this before. You say this all the time, and I can look back and see this. There's many times I've doubted my salvation. I've never doubted the call to ministry. Right. And I don't think the Lord would call someone who doesn't know him. Absolutely. And even in seasons of maybe sin, but maybe just seasons of where you don't hear the Lord or whatever's going on there, he's always brought me back to that if I've called you, I know you. Yeah. And so that's kind of what brings us to here. Been here since the end of 2020. I think that's right. Yep. So almost 6 years. Yeah. And it's been a journey. Yeah.
So Paul says, again, my brothers and sisters, I'm self-convinced that you also are full of kindness, filled with all knowledge, and able to instruct one another. Nevertheless, I've written to remind you more boldly on some points. Because of grace given me by God, you and I understand we're called by grace, not
Sure.
just to salvation, but to full-time vocational ministry, and that God didn't have to use either one of us. You
Right.
know, we're just, it's by God's grace that you and I hold the positions that we hold in the church. But he says, here's the point though, he says to be a minister of Christ Jesus, not to be put on a pedestal, not to enjoy a cushy job or to be placed in some position of honor, but to minister. That word minister there, you understand, means in the Greek really is a servant. So he says to be a minister of Christ Jesus to the Gentiles, serving as a priest of the gospel of God. And he says, my purpose is that the Gentiles may be acceptable offering. So, you know, I believe that Paul knew that the Jews that he was talking to here would understand the sacrificial system that had been set up for many, many, many generations, and how that word minister there went back to the old priesthood, and it was a term that was used by the Levites. It was from the Jews and of the ministers who would go behind the curtain and would even give sacrificial offerings of dead animals on behalf of the people. I believe Paul's sending him a picture here saying, hey, I do the same thing here, but now it's a living sacrifice because God's died. Jesus has died once and for all. And so he's saying this is part of my calling, is to reach these people, the Gentiles. Do you feel like God's given you some specific calling, or is he still working? Our callings are always sometimes being tweaked, I think, along our service. But where do you think you're at in that calling, and where do you think God's called you to? Do you have some kind of master vision that God's given you for your ministry? Or
I think as you were asking that before you stated it, I think that does kind of shift based on settings we're in, the people we're with, not necessarily the calling, but how we do it, how we carry it out. I didn't know when I came into this what that looked like. The more I do it, the more I kind of figure it out. And part of this is learning what you're gifted with, also what you're passionate about, the things you're not gifted in. I think that's wise to know those things.
yeah, it wouldn't be wise for me to leave music next Sunday. You know, I mean,
Yeah, it just, as you figure those out, what I've become very passionate about, so a few different things. I enjoy preaching, specifically the gospel, the Bible. That's the part of ministry in whatever setting, whether it's in this group with teenagers, with kids, whatever. That's the part that comes easy because it's fun. It's a passion. But I've been that way since I started in ministry. The way that my calling has clarified is the desire to shepherd people. I enjoy preaching, but nothing gets me fired up as much as seeing someone like latch on and get it. And that's not always through preaching.
right.
Sometimes that's through a
Usually
Thursday afternoon counseling session and I say that I don't not enjoy those, and I've even become to enjoy some of the things that at one time I wasn't passionate about, because I've learned that this is part of shepherding people.
Yes.
And it's part of leading people. And so even in those moments of, man, I've got to meet with a 14-year-old this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and God knows what he has going on in his life and all these things. The Lord brings me back to, this is part of shepherding people. Because it's not like, I think people think oftentimes that we have a different Holy Spirit than they do.
Yeah.
And we don't.
It's a higher level or something.
Yeah, but it is a higher calling and a responsibility that God has given us.
Higher accountability.
Yeah, and higher accountability. And so even in those moments, I'm learning and beginning to love that, hey, even as I'm going to help someone clean out this building or counseling or whatever that those situations are that maybe at one point in time I'm not very excited about doing, I'm starting to learn that if God has called me to shepherd people, I think preaching is a part of that. I think we clearly shepherd people through preaching, but I think we also shepherd people through counseling sessions, through serving alongside them.
Yes.
I think we shepherd them even like small group meetings. I think me and one of our church members go to the gym together often. And one of the best things about that is that's become a relationship where, hey, this is what I've been reading in the Bible. What do you think about it? And so I get to use that outside of this building as more so part of a calling to shepherd. And one thing I think I noticed with that, that I've come to know that shepherding people is my calling because it doesn't just happen at church. It happens outside of church. Right. And I think like preaching typically only happens in the church. That's part of the calling. Different things we do with Kayla helping kids get it. That's mostly happening in the church. But the overview of that calling of what we're doing and shepherding people happens throughout our lives. And so I don't know specifically what that looks like all the way around. I do know that the umbrella that it all falls under is shepherding people unto the Lord. And that's in personal relationships. That's through ministry stuff as far as curriculum writing and preaching and different stuff that happens within the church. But the Lord's helped me grow to see that no matter what I'm doing, that if I'm actually leading people into Him and to Him and helping people get it, like really get that this is not just knowing about God, but knowing God, that fires me up. And I think that's why I used to love that when it would preach and you would see light bulbs, when I would preach and see light bulbs go off. But now I realize that happens in conversations at the gym.
Yes.
It's not just restricted to one certain thing. And so all that to say, I would say the calling God has given me is to lead and shepherd people to Him. And it comes out in different ways in different places. And
you said
enjoy
something that just triggered a thought in my head. You said, people think that you and I have a different Holy Spirit, so to speak. I think you can also say that for youth ministry versus like adult ministry. Some people may see youth ministry as JV ministry, so to speak. Like you're a youth pastor until you can graduate to be a senior pastor.
Right.
You and I both know a guy who's youth minister here in town for 30 years.
Yeah, 40.
Did a fantastic job of that. But do the youth go, like, is their salvation junior? Are they less important? Are their souls different than adults? I mean, is that less important that they hear the gospel than adults? Or, are you grooming them to become adults so that they can hear the gospel? Talk about that.
Not at all. I also think, too, it's different in their context and their lives and their struggles and different things. But one of the blessings I've had of being here is my ministry at Lighthouse has never just strictly been youth ministry, right, which is unique, I think, to a lot of places. But that's been beneficial for me because I've been in counseling sessions with youth that I've never been in that before. And so that's just equipped me to be able to do those things on my own. And there are times when I've been in a counseling session with a student and a parent or whatever, a teenager and a parent. And I've thought, man, I would rather deal with adult problems. Like sometimes I don't think it's junior at all. I think sometimes it's the opposite.
More complicated, yeah.
But too, I do know statistics show that a large percentage of believers who were active in the church later in life got it when they were teenagers.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's valuable ministry.
Absolutely.
That's what happened for me.
Gosh,
that's
me too.
what happened for you.
Me too.
And I know there's stories of 80-year-olds getting saved, but most of the time that's how it happens. And so I think it's incredibly valuable. But I also think we fail to realize, I think people make the mistakes often that they try to preach a JV gospel to teenagers.
Yes, absolutely.
And what I've learned, and this has taken years, is that teenagers can understand the big things of the Bible if you teach them well.
Right.
That's the kicker, if you teach them well. But I always say, if they can understand trigonometry, they can understand
Right.
basic theology.
Right.
And so it's almost the opposite. To me, it seems an advantage that if I can get them inform their hearts and minds at 16, I tell our students all the time, I wish I had not wasted so many years. Like, if you do what I didn't do, you could know God so much better at 25 than I did.
Yes.
If you spent all of those years. When I was, like I explained earlier, when I was kind of just like, I was in, but I wasn't all the way in. I was trying to figure it out. I think it's all there. And I think, and we say this all the time, I think the future of local churches depends upon that. And I think God's going to preserve his church regardless. But 5 years from now, some of these teenagers are going to be leaders in the church. And if that's the case, I think we should want them to be led well
100%.
and shepherded well. But I also think they're in a stage of life where everything's focused around learning. So it's not as overwhelming because their minds are already being formed and shifted. And that's one of the kind of shifts we've taken in the past few years and struggles is the enemy through our culture is trying to shape especially their minds so much. You see it in social media and in the news. If they can get this whole new generation to believe a certain direction, it'll change the future of the country and the culture. And so we've almost counterattacked that with trying to help them develop Christian worldviews, to see the world through the lens of the Bible and through the way God says things are, whether it's gender or sexuality or just obeying him. The enemy's attacking them probably more than adults in some ways. So I think it's even more valuable to counterattack that with that emphasis. And I think it's awesome to see that sometimes they get it more than adults do.
Yeah.
Some do.
Yeah.
Not across the board, but I think they can understand the gospel and obey the Lord and glorify him with their lives as much as adults can. Absolutely. It's the same spirit. It's the same mission, the same God. So that's why I think it's valuable.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Look, Paul says here, he says in verse 20, my aim to preach the gospel where Christ has not been named, so that I will not build on someone else's foundation, but as is written. And he goes on and he quotes Old Testament. But then he goes on to, that along with what he was talking about, his purpose is to the Gentiles, that they may be an acceptable offering. He's painting a picture of his calling.
That's right.
His specific calling and ministry. So he couples that. No, you just gave us your calling and ministry. But he couples that with, he says, that is why I have been prevented many times from coming to you. So Paul's saying, look, I would love to come and hang out with you. I'd love to just come and fellowship. But I can't do that until I have done this calling of my ministry first. And then also he goes on and he talks about how he's taking an offering to the Jews in Jerusalem that was given to him by some Gentiles because they're so thankful for them and them sharing the gospel with him. So he says, hey, I've also got some administrative things I have to do to accomplish before we can come and hang out. Paul said, my heart is to come hang out, but I got to handle some administrative things first. I shared today a memory just a few minutes ago that popped up on my Facebook. It was a picture of me. Actually, I was at your old school, Crawford County High School, when I was coaching Central Fellowship. We'd rent their field before we had a field, and I was coaching on the sideline there. And I talked about how I miss those days. I miss coaching, but also how really I'm doing the same. That's what I'm doing now. Yeah. It's just a different playbook. And how as you were talking, and I read what Paul's talking about. It also reminds me that before I was able to coach on Friday night, I had to go early Friday morning and sometimes Thursday night and line the field and paint it.
Yep.
Cut the grass, paint it, set up water bottles, do all that kind of stuff. That's all the things that people don't see, the glamorous parts that has to be done in order for us to be able to stay on the sidelines and coach the team. So talk a little bit about what do you do administratively that's requirements for you to be able to stand and preach the gospel on Wednesday night or Sunday night or whenever it is that you do to the kids.
Yeah, I think, and to preface all of that too, it's been extremely helpful to me, both with you and the last pastor I served under, that both of them very much set the precedent across the board that we're never going to ask our people to do something we're not willing to do.
Absolutely.
Now, there may be times when it would be really helpful if they would do it,
Sure,
and
absolutely.
we run into that,
Yeah.
but there's often times where we're plunging toilets and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But I think that's good leadership and good servant leadership. Gosh. So let's just run through a week. I do a lot of our like audio, video editing type stuff and setting up here in the sanctuary for Sunday mornings. Taylor and I kind of work together on that. Also, typically weekly, there are worship team things that come up that Taylor just wants to run them by somebody, and we kind of work that way. He and I with youth ministry as well, just to have another ear and another perspective on different stuff. So involved in a lot of that. Writing curriculum for small groups, for youth small groups, writing messages that we do Wednesday night with students, planning those schedules, communicating with Jamie, who takes a lot of that from me. The older I've gotten, the better I've gotten at delegating the things that someone else can do.
Right.
There's a balance there that I've always struggled with, that you can do this, and I know you're passionate about doing this. And it's not the typical, I want it done this way, so I'm going to do it. It's more so, this is my job, in a sense, and you're volunteering. And I don't want to just give volunteers the junk jobs to do.
Yeah,
And so,
sure.
but I'm learning to balance that out better. And so Jamie helps me a lot with planning like youth services and stuff.
Because the people grow
Yes, they need that.
themselves when we allow them to do ministry.
Absolutely.
And we just come alongside them and coach them in somewhat. Yeah.
And
give them the tools.
I've grown. I don't know how much the church, just a peek behind the curtain here, as far as how you operate with us. You're typically very, I want to be in the know of what's going on, what y'all are doing, how it's going, why you're doing it, what you're doing it. But you take it and run with it. And you trust us typically to do that. You want to know why we're doing it, what we're doing. But, hey, I've hired you to do this. You go do this.
Absolutely.
And one of the most beneficial things about that to me is there's been conversations you and I have had. I mean, just casually in the hallway about, hey, that event y'all did looked really good. What happened there? You should probably do that again. Or tell me about this at this event. Or maybe in a staff meeting it comes up and, hey, we did this and this is what we were thinking and this was why, but it just didn't turn out well. And then you say, probably shouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
And so I say that to say they kind of need those same opportunities of handing those things to them. And sometimes, like, for students, and she crushes this, but like Tammy White keeps an inventory of drinks and snacks and things like that. And she checks them. She'll text me to check them. She'll pick it up. She'll bring it in, stock it all up. I have to make her give me receipts to reimburse her. Like, it's just her heart. She just wants to do that. And honestly, to me, that was an hour or two of my week a couple years ago that I could have done something differently. And she just came to me and we talked about it. She was like, oh, I'd love to do that, be able to help. And I'm like, really? Please take
Please
please.
take it, yeah.
And so learning to just pass certain things off and trust others with them, even like Justin Rice and Chris Tucker, as simple as giving them to plan and lead a game that we do with students on Wednesday nights. Because if not, I'm working through a lesson and a worship service and different stuff. And then it's 6:15 and I'm like, man, I haven't planned a game for tonight.
Yeah.
And it's just all those things stack up. And so all that, having a team and leading them and pouring into them, also part of that, and you understand this, is, hey, I handed this to you, and you've done a really good job with it. However those conversations go, sometimes that comes with, hey, we need to look at why you did this way and adjust.
Sure.
And I've learned and grown too to recognize that those are not fun, but that's for their good and for the good of the ministry. Right. And typically when people are on the same page as you and they get the main goal, even if sometimes those conversations are difficult, they get why we're moving in the right direction. I just think that's good leadership overall. Yeah. It's not always easy. And so anyway, leading the team, planning those services, small group, discipleship type material, sometimes week to week. Sometimes in a week, we spend hours in your office talking through Bible passages. Mm-hmm. And those are just things that come up. Sometimes you run into something that's, hey, we need to just talk through this. Just to get better understanding. I meet with certain students weekly to counsel them. Or just more so discipleship, just walking through the Bible and talking through life, things like that. But again, back to something I said earlier, I've tried to shape my mind and perspective to understand that even in those things, it's carrying out the work of the gospel. Yes. And so if I can view those as not just a task to cross off, but an act of shepherding people, right, it can change your perspective on it. And sure, it's not just something I've got to do, but it's, hey, maybe this is another opportunity the Lord's given me to do what he's called me to do. I'm sure there's other stuff, but
suffice to say, you have lots of administrative tasks that you have to
sure
do. It's not just about preaching on Wednesday night.
Absolutely.
And that leads up to that. Somebody's got to turn the air on. Somebody's got to make sure for youth they got to have snacks. Right?
Everywhere.
They got to have games. There's certain things that you have to do to accomplish. So Paul talks about those things, and he says, these things have kept me from visiting you. And once I get my administrative task done, and that's we talk about around here. Once we have to put our work in so we can get our work done.
Right. But
also, he goes on to verse 30. He says, now that we've said all that, he says, I appeal to you. That's a deep prayer request. I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, through our Lord Jesus Christ and through the love of the Spirit, to strive. That word again, strive is to work, come alongside, to carry a burden together, not for me, not instead of me, not put on me, but that we will come under the same burden together to carry. He says, with me in fervent. Again, he qualifies the word prayer here. He says in fervent prayer to God. But he qualifies it with not just prayer, like you're going to sit down in a blessing and say, some rote, nursery rhyme that you've learned. Yeah. But, this is serious. We're appealing to God. He says, on my behalf. But it's not just for him. He says, pray that I may be rescued from the unbelievers in Judea, that my ministry to Jerusalem may be acceptable to the saints, and that by God's will, I may come to you and with joy and be refreshed together with you. He's saying, I will be refreshed when I come to you, but he's asking them to partner with him and in prayer. So I ask you this. How can these people, the church at Lighthouse Baptist Church, come underneath your arms as Aaron and hers to maybe do some administrative things, but particularly to pray for you? How can they partner with you in prayer that you may be more effective in the calling that God's given you here to Lighthouse and in your personal life?
Gosh, where do I start? One of the unique challenges, being 9 months married, is learning family and ministry. Oh, yeah. And she's awesome. Genuinely. And she's always, like, when ministry things come, she completely understands, and that's such a blessing. But for me, learning, and this is something we talked through recently, a couple weeks ago, had a situation that was just heavy, just a counseling situation, relationship with people, and talking through some stuff, and then I went home, and I'm talking to you about it, I'm talking to them about it, I'm talking to someone else about it, and I'm getting hit message after message. And eventually I just tilted my head back and just let out a big sigh. And I had explained to her, I said, I've given so much out today that I'm sorry I don't have anything to give you. Yeah. And so, and it wasn't a big deal. She was fine. It was 10 o'clock at night, so she was like, well, you do you, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
But learning, not that I have to keep myself from some people to keep myself for my marriage in the energy sense,
right.
But learning just to communicate that well, that, hey, today's one of those days.
And to know when that your wife needs you first.
Right.
And this person may want you at the moment, to be with them, but maybe that can happen tomorrow.
Right.
When your wife can't always be second place.
And she's always going to say, go do what you need to do.
I had a pastor, very dear friend and mentor of mine, Brother Houston, told me a long time ago, he said, Tim, you better remember, God gave you Tanya before he gave you the church. Mm-hmm. And you better take care of her, you won't have the church.
Yeah.
So I don't love my wife so that I can have the church.
Right.
But I also have to remember priorities,
Well, and because she's always going to say, go take care of what you need to take care of. And she understands.
It's such a blessing in ministry.
It is. And they understand there are certain things only we can take care of. I can't.
Sometimes you got to go.
If I don't do this, nobody else is.
Yeah.
But the prayer I ask for is for me to have the wisdom and the discernment to be able to tell the difference in the two. A couple months ago, we had a big accident here. 9 o'clock at night, got a phone call. And this was the first weekend day we had in a month. We came home, cooked dinner, was sitting down at the table. I said, I got to go.
This was an exception.
This was an exception for sure. But she didn't even know the details. I said, I got to go. And she was cool with it. And that was a situation where the situation didn't matter. I mean, I was going and she was going to be fine with it either way. But knowing how to balance marriage, family, ministry, how to balance those things. And for her in that this is new to her. That she's only been married to a pastor for 9 months. Right. And so just the conversations we have along the lines of, thankfully she is far more reserved and conservative in personality than I am. So she has to reel me back in more than I have to her. But just in ministry, trying to lead her as well into wisdom, as far as, thankfully she dressed modestly. She doesn't flirt with the things of the world, but just talking to her, hey, this is why we don't do this, especially the position we're in. Yeah. Just learning to lead her into that for longevity. I don't ever want to do anything else or have to do anything else. And so just pray for that marriage. And everything's great. We're good. I'm just saying, just as we navigate that. Also, let's see, just prayer, wisdom in a sense, but dealing with teenagers, there's always some situations that continually keep coming up that I've never dealt with before. And so I'm thankful to have people around me that have. You have some, Taylor some. It would be so much easier if we knew what people needed when they needed it, but we all, and we could make them listen to it, but we can't. And so sometimes that's just patience, that the Lord would help me to remain faithful in the task he's given me, even when I don't see the results when I want to see them, to not grow discouraged when I see somebody that I poured into over and over and over again and them still going wayward. Oh, gosh. Yeah. And part of that is reminding myself, God's called me to be faithful above all else. He hasn't called me to save people. Yeah. And I'll tell this really quickly. When we moved here to this church, to this building, we had, I'd been here 3 or 4 months, and it's been about a year later, week after week after week, pouring into students, eating breakfast with students, doing different things. And I drove home one Wednesday night and just cried the whole way home. And I got home and I lived with my mom at the time, and she said, "What's wrong? I can tell you've been crying." And I said, "They're never gonna get it." And I was burdened for teenagers. And I went and prayed, and the Lord said, "What have I called you to do?" And I said, "Be faithful." He said, "Then do that." Just stop trying to save people and do that. The next week, Taylor Lambert came to me and surrendered his life to the Lord.
Yeah. Amen.
And so he'll always be special to me, because in a season of I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting my effort, the Lord said, "Your obedience is never wasted." And that was through him. And he knows that story. But just for the perseverance, that there are burdens we carry that nobody else that sits in this room on Sunday knows. And that's fine. We're called to carry those. I consider it a privilege that we get to walk with people through those situations. I met with someone a couple weeks ago. She said, "I'm so sorry we're bringing this to you." I said, "I'm glad you're not taking it to your coworkers.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're bringing it to us." But just with that, just being able to shepherd people well and to carry the weight and bear the burden of that, just of whatever it is. We can make ministry sound like it's harder than other people's jobs and more stressful, and certain times maybe it is. But I don't think we should ever forget that you said earlier, it's by God's grace that we get to do this. And so just for the perseverance to push through and remain faithful to him throughout all the times. Just so pray for that perseverance, marriage, navigating marriage and family, and future, like kids. I don't know those answers.
Yeah.
People ask us all the time. I say, not today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just navigating how the Lord wants to use us and what he wants to do with us and our family and all of that. And encouraging us. That may be selfish to ask, but we never
If
will
you're
turn
not
away.
Healthy, you know this. If you're not healthy mentally, physically, emotionally,
Yeah.
you can't pour out to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think not for the sake of, I don't need people to feed my ego, and this could be heard the wrong way, but I would tell the people who watch this, never skip an opportunity to encourage your pastors and their staff. I don't need to hear, that was a good message. That's fine. But more so in the sense of, hey, we see what you're doing. It matters. Thank you for the difference you made in our family. Just those kind of things. That is so important. Because there are days when I go home and I say, this makes no difference. And I think that's the enemy. I think that's how he attacks us. But, and I'm not like ready to give up.
Yeah.
Don't hear that. But
you don't want to get there either.
I don't ever want to be there, for sure. And so, prayer for that. Yeah, I think that's.
Let me say this, and then we'll close. But you said something. You said, you never miss the opportunity to encourage your pastors, and you don't want to hear, or you don't need to hear, "Hey, that was a great message." Tell me if this resonates with you. I personally, first of all, I have my love language is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
And that's not me wanting praises. It's me wanting to understand, have I met your expectations?
And so, what did I do to meet them?
Right. That's my key. That's perfect, because I don't need to hear someone say, "Hey, that was a great message." What I need to hear is, "Hey, the Lord used that message in my life.
Yes.
Here's how."
Exactly.
Here's how it has helped me be closer to the Lord.
Yes.
And then I know that it's hit.
Yep.
I don't need you to leave here and go, "That was pleasing to me." I need you to leave here and go, this made a change
I,
in my life.
I don't want them to take that statement and think, well, I'm never going to tell our pastors they did a
Yeah.
good job
Yeah,
preaching.
that's right,
The-
right.
What
That's what I mean.
encourages me is we do this all the time. We can get up and talk in front of anyone and do it fairly well. That comes natural to us. What I can't do is, let me tell you what the Lord told me through that. I can't do that.
Right. I can't see that.
I
in your
can't,
heart.
and I can't see that, but also I can't speak that. That's what the Lord said. And so when you say that, it's affirming to me, I obeyed the Lord in my task. It wasn't about how I said it or even what I said. It was
God
that
used
I said what God wanted me to say and God used it. And so in that sense, it's just encouraging. And that goes back to caring again about the call God's given me, caring about shepherding people. When people say, God spoke this to me, or, hey, when you preach this in your message, I left there and did this. That fires me up.
1,000%.
Because it's like, you don't just hear it, you get it, and you're doing it. And so those encouragements are the best.
Absolutely.
That's an encouragement to me, because then it's just a reminder again, man, that was good because that was faithful.
Yeah.
That wasn't good because I told a good illustration or a good story. It was good because it was faithful.
Perfect. Listen, I hope that we've been faithful, and I hope that this message this week helps you grow, helps you become more effective in your ministry as fellow followers of Christ, brothers and sisters in Christ, because understand we're all ministers for the gospel. Some of us get paid to do it every day, but we're all ministers of the gospel. So I can't wait to see you Sunday. I love you.